see. Just to let you guys know as well, this whole call will be recorded. So I will leave some time at the end of this presentation to give you all some time for questions. If there's any questions, you could definitely hold on to them and ask us later on in the call. So let's get started. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right, so let's get it started. Today, we're presenting you with the Tenant Rights Tenant Association workshop. I will be scrolling through a few of them because a few of the slides are in Spanish as well. So please let me know if you do not understand English. I could try my best to help you understand it in Spanish as well. But either way, let's go over the types of housing you may be currently living in. This can help you further understand your rights as a tenant in New York City. So many of us live in different types of housing, and we'll go over a few of them right now. So one of the types of housing that you may be living in right now in New York is, so these are New York State rent stabilization. So a little brief idea of what state rent stabilization is in New York. One would be a building with 6 or more units built before January 1st, 1974, and or a building built or extensively renovated after January 1st, 1974 with special tax benefits. Some of these tax benefits that you might see are a 421A or a J51. Another type of housing would be government funded housing. Some of these government funding housings are the Michelle Lama program, which provides affordable rental and cooperative housing to moderate and middle income families. The other one that you may find would be public housing. And here in New York City, one of the number one public housing agencies is NYCHA, NYCHA. And lastly, they are people with Section 8 vouchers. Section 8 voucher is a rent subsidy program which assists low-income people and families who meet the income guidelines to access affordable, safe, and sanitary housing in the private market. I did put this in asterisks just so people can understand and get the message that at the moment, the currently Section 8 voucher program is not accepting new applicants. When they do, they will share it in the news or in the newspaper. You will find out, but at the moment, they aren't accepting any new vouchers. So let's talk about tenant rights. This is why we're all here. Let's go over a few tenant rights. Again, these are just a few key tenant rights. There are plenty more. Again, at the end of this presentation, you could definitely ask any questions. So let's talk about your first right, the right to livable conditions. So I believe everyone in New York deserves a right to live in an apartment that has livable conditions, especially if you're paying your rent. Everyone now is paying very high rent. And because we're paying high rent, we definitely deserve good livable conditions. So these are just some of the conditions your landlord must provide to you as a tenant under the New York State warranty of availability law, one of them is working heat and hot water, no mold or mildew, no peeling paint, no mice or other vermin, working carbon monoxide fire detector, and window guards. Number two is landlord must address housing violations. So let's say, for instance, there's been a few issues going on at your apartment or in your building, and you've been telling your landlord like, hey, can you help me fix this? I'm having this and this issue, and it's really affecting our living conditions. The landlord then tells you, hey, I'll fix it soon. They shrug it off, or they avoid any other contact with you. So as a tenant, you have the right to file a complaint with HPD. So if you're filing a complaint with HPD, that would be calling 311. HPD will then inspect your apartment and tag these issues under violation classes. Your landlord must then address this issue accordingly. So on the table that you're seeing right now, I go over a few, I'm going over all of the violation classes and what type of violation they are and how long, what the time period is where the landlord must fix these issues, or else they face consequences like penalties, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll go over these violation classes one by one. I'll try to go as fast as I can. Class A is non-hazardous and your landlord has 90 days to fix the issue. Class B is hazardous and your landlord has 30 days to fix the issue. So here we have three different types of Class Cs. So the first class is lead-based paints, window guards, mold, mice, cockroaches, and rats, which is immediately hazardous, and your landlord has 21 days to fix the issue. There's the second class C, which is heat and hot water violations, which is immediately hazardous. And of course, with that, they have to fix it immediately. And now the last one is all the other hazards, which is also immediately hazardous, and your landlord has to fix it within 24 hours. Sorry, let me go. Oops. I do apologize for that. Give me 1 second. But as the slide said, I made sure to put this at the very end. But either way, what is stated at the bottom is your landlord cannot, if you do report anything to HPD, your landlord cannot use that against you. You have the right to call HPD without facing any harassment from your landlord. Number 3, did my landlord raise my rent again? So this information will change by the end of the year. By November, the law has changed. So this was the most current rent laws at the moment. So for the property owner, in unregulated housing, an owner could raise the rent with notice at the end of the lease term. So unregulated housing means an apartment with less than 6 units, maybe someone who's living in an apartment within a house, something that's not rent regulated. So yeah, the property owner has the right to raise their rent, but they had to let you know at least by the end of the lease that they're going to raise the rent, or at least give you some time to let you know that they're raising the rent. So the rights for a tenant who lives in a rent stabilized building, these are some of your rights. So rent increase rates are determined by New York City Rent Guidelines Board annually. So every year, the New York City Rent Guideline Board, they will have a meeting, and during that meeting, they'll figure out if they will raise or they would bring down the percentage of how much landlords can raise the rent. For a tenant in a rent stabilized apartment, the landlord is required to give you a 60-day notice if you have been renting for about 1 or 2 years. The landlord has to give you a 90-day notice if you have been renting for over 2 years. Landlords must notify a tenant at least 90 days of their lease renewal. And last but not least, rent for a 1-year lease can only be increased by 1.5% and 2.5% for 2-year leases. Like I said from a few minutes ago, that they did change this. So I believe anybody can tell me, can let me know if I'm wrong at this, but I believe that with the new RGB, which is the Rent Guidelines Board, I believe for a 1-year lease, they can raise it up 3.5%, and for a 2-year lease, it's going up to 5%. So that will be changing after November of this year. And number 4, you have the right to no harassment. Harassment by an owner to force tenants out of their apartment or to surrender their rights is illegal. Some examples may include not offering leases, lease renewals, or repeatedly trying to pay you to move out your home or to give up your rights. Unjustified eviction notices or illegal lockout, which means if they're giving you, let's say, for example, a week to leave your home, or if they decide while you're out one day to change the locks of your door, that is illegal. Failure to provide necessary repairs or utilities. The only legal way to try to evict a non-rent paying tenant is through a non-payment or holdover proceeding in housing court. Again, the only way a landlord can legally evict someone is if they bring it to housing court, or as a non-payment or holdover proceeding. So if you have been paying your rent on time without failure and your landlord just decides off a whim to just evict you, just know that that is illegal. Also, another asterisk for people, undocumented tenants are also protected from any form of harassment. I do get a lot of undocumented tenants who are afraid to speak up, who are afraid to call 311. They're trying to avoid any issues with their landlord because they believe, due to the fact that they do not have any documents, that they do not have any rights, which is very wrong. Here in New York City, any undocumented tenant has housing rights. And number 5, the right to form a tenant association. Tenants in a building with housing violations or poor management issues have the right to organize a tenant association without fearing harassment from the owner or building manager. Tenants have the rights to hold group tenant meetings in the building common areas, for example, the lobby, hallways, etc. Usually what we try to tell tenants in a building is that, yes, you can call 311, you can call HPD and make your complaints. But as we all know, things work a lot better if you work in a group, especially if that group involves any other tenants in that same building who are experiencing the same issues as you. So sometimes you may speak to another tenant and you may realize that that same rat problem you have in your house, they may be having the same problem. I put in a little bubble, a little note. There is more power in the group than with just an individual. So that's 10 people versus 1. Who will win? We would hope in this situation, if a whole building is going up against the landlord, that the tenants of that building will win versus the landlord. All right. Now that we went over the tenant rights, let's go over how to form a tenant association and just a few tidbit information on how to form one and what is a tenant association. So as my last slide was talking about a tenants association, let's talk about how to form one. What is a tenant association? A tenant association is a group of tenants, neighbors who get together to discuss issues in their building. This group works together as a collective to improve their housing conditions. These are some things you should do before your first tenant association. Let's say you already spoke to your neighbors and your neighbors are interested in creating an association. This should be the first thing. Well, these are some of the things you should do before you have your first meeting to keep things a bit organized. So A, have a conversation with your neighbors in regards to the conditions of your building. B, ask for help from other neighbors who may be interested. C, decide on a date to have your first tenant association meeting. D, work together with about 1 or 2 other tenants to create an agenda for your first meeting. E, conduct research on your building. And F, make a turnout plan. So that means outreach. Once you have some idea of what your association will be composed of, meaning which of your neighbors will be more interested in taking part of this, then how will you spread your message? So the turnout plan is very important. It's good to outreach to other tenant association, maybe in your neighborhood or maybe in your borough. It's good to reach out to anybody who will definitely listen and get the attention of the landlord. So now that you have an idea who may be in your tenant association, let's talk about how to run a tenant association. Meetings should be short, productive, and enjoyable. Stick to your written agenda. Make sure that everything is a group decision and not just the decision of 1 or 2 individuals. Again, I'll repeat that. Make sure that everything in a group is a group decision and not just the decision of 1 or 2 individuals. Have a clear plan for future meetings. Document everything. Create roles for the tenants in the association. So some of the roles may be facilitator, note taker, presenters, et cetera, et cetera. Find a way to keep the communication going, even when not in person. Because of COVID, as we see right now, we're doing this virtually. So try to find ways to like speak to your neighbor, if it's through text, if it's over the phone, if it's through an app. There's many different ways to keep that communication flowing, even if you're not doing it one-on-one. And last but not least, plan where to meet and what to bring to the meeting. You will also need to identify ways to solve group problems. So even when you try to have a conversation with the owner, sometimes tenants may have to do more in order to get things done. These are some of the examples. So again, as I said before, a group is more powerful than an individual. So if you do things as a group, you have a better chance of getting heard, getting things done. So you can group call 311 with common complaints. So let's talk about that rat issue. Get a whole bunch of the tenants, a lot of your neighbors to call about the same issue. Filing tenant initiated housing court actions. Rent strikes. Grow your group, get organized. Find out if landlord owns other buildings and contact the tenants there. That's a good one. So if you do have the resources, you can find out if that landlord has other buildings And if those buildings have the same conditions that your building has, maybe you can even start having a conversation with those tenants in the other building and help them get organized as well. Hold a rally in front of landlord's home. Let's keep these rallies civilized. We're not trying to do anything that can get us in trouble, but we do have the right to a rally. Reach out to other tenant associations for help. There are a lot of different tenant associations all over New York City. If you need help trying to find them, you can definitely give us like a call, or you can contact us and we can let you know what other tenant associations are out there as well. Social media or the press, and reach out to local elected officials. My note to this is remember to be creative, and also actions speak louder than words. So just having that demonstration in front of the landlord's home can scare the landlord or spook the landlord into thinking, hey, I lost the power here, and maybe I should listen to my tenants, and maybe things can get done without having to go to court or even the media. All right. So before I give you guys any time for question and answers, I'll leave that for the very end of the call. But I will show some resources for anyone who may be interested in more information. Some of the information I put on these slides, they are coming from these sources that I found. So the 10 New York City tenant rights your landlord doesn't want you to know. That's a good article. Anybody can take this information and read it on your own. The ABCs of housing, and residential tenant rights guide, Guía de Derechos de Inquilinos. You do have my information and where the office is located, along with my coworker, Juana Iris. Her information is also on the slide as well. I'll give maybe about a minute or two for anyone who wants to take down this information, they can. So I'll give everyone a minute. All right. I'm gonna stop the screen share here, and I'm gonna introduce again Michelle Santiago. She's coming from Brooklyn Legal Services Corp A. Again, she's gonna go over some slides, and if anyone has any questions, you can definitely wait until the end, and we'll try to get to you as soon as possible. Michelle, I'm going to put your PowerPoint, and you let me know when to go on to the next slide.
Thank you. Michelle. Can anyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. Today I'm going to discuss with you a little more about tenants associations and the importance of having those. There goes my slides. Wait for them to be put up. So one of the basic questions is why have a tenant association rather than just fighting one's own battles? As Juan said, a group is stronger than just one individual, and putting forward a strong face is a big part of the battle. We have the why, how, and the who of tenant associations. The why is basically because tenant association is a place where tenants can come together to discuss issues. Among these issues, we have repairs, lease offers, overcharging of rent, security issues, rent receipts issues or lack thereof, any discriminatory practices that you feel are being done to special classes of tenants, failure of management to provide receipts and or leases, and any other general expectation that a tenant living in New York City should expect from their landlord. In terms of how, an organization is a simple association between tenants. It is putting a flyer in your building, going door to door and asking your neighbor if they want to join a tenant association. Or you can reach out to Cypress or us to provide assistance at Brooklyn Legal Services. Finally, the who. A tenant association is as simple as one resident plus another resident. Just two tenants are necessary to create a tenant association, but ideally, we would like at least 1/3 of all tenants involved before we start a collective action against a landlord. You can go to the next slide, please, Juan. Thank you. So I have a guide here on forming a tenant association. So this is just a simple summary of steps, probably a piggybacking of what already Juan mentioned. Talk to your neighbors and get contact information and see if they have interest in joining. Follow up with more detailed information and schedule a meeting. Have an introductory meeting to discuss common interests and goals with other tenants. What are some of the common issues some of you are seeing among each other? Or what are some of the concerns that you're having? At subsequent meetings, choose a structure for the association and pass bylaws. How are you going to conduct your meetings? How are you going to function as an association? How are you going to conduct yourselves in terms of practice and representation of other tenants? And that's it. You're a tenant association. Congratulations. At this point, you should consider consulting with or hiring an attorney to become official, but it's not necessary. You know, taking actions towards your tenant association goals and getting your landlord to do the same is part of the big sweat equity that comes with having a tenant association. Part of the hugest part, the biggest part of having a tenant association is sweat equity and how much you're willing to do to preserve your rights as a tenant. We can go to the next slide, please. Here are some common questions that are very common, very presented among tenants, and the first one is, do tenants have the legal right to organize themselves into tenant groups and association? And the answer is yes. The rights of tenants to organize into associations is specifically protected by the laws of New York State, as well as the Constitution of the United States. Can a tenant association meet in your building? Yes, you can meet in the building. They have the right to meet in common areas of your building, like the lobby. What if the organizers of my tenant associations don't live in my building? Do they have the right to enter the meetings? Yes, they do. They have the right to organize. They have the right to access for labor unions and organizers, and should allow tenant association organizations to enter the building for tenant association meetings. You have that right to bring in people who are organizing your tenant association meetings. Can your landlord interfere with these associations? No, even though they might try to by sending other representatives. They are not allowed to. The landlord may not interfere with the association. In addition, your landlord cannot discriminate against or punish anyone for organizing or joining a tenant association. We can go to the next slide, please. More of the common questions are, can our association talk to people in the building and advertise and to get new members? Yes, you can put up flyers in the building, go door to door, talk to each other. The association may ask around for new members. Additionally, posters and other advertisements may be displayed in the windows of your doors and in the common areas of the building. Posting them outside of the building is a little more gray in the area of the law. However, you can hand out flyers among tenants. Can the members of the association go on strike and withhold their rent? So this is a right that you have, and you may exercise this right to withhold rent as a group. However, there is a big however. If you are choosing to withhold rent, you need to make sure that you are saving it. Because in addition, you don't need to ask the court for permission to do this. One association can decide to withhold rent, and they can. However, your landlord also has the right to sue you in landlord-tenant court for a non-payment claim. And at that point, if the court decides that you need to pay the full rent or a reduction thereof of the rent based on your non-payment action, and you don't have the money available, your landlord may be able to evict you if you don't have the money available. So there are two ways that you can save the money, because ultimately tenants will be liable for their own rent. And the action against the tenant will be individual for a non-payment. So the first way is for the tenant to save it on their own and just put it on the side in a savings account or something of the sort. Another option is you can agree as an association to create a group bank account to hold the money in escrow. And we, Brooklyn Legal Services, can assist you with that, and other organizations as well. You can go to the next slide, please. So why else would you want to organize a tenant association? So we made this slide here because all the words at the end are very key: to help, to fight, to prove, to file, to seek, to make, obtain, work, pursue, and investigate. These are all things that tenant associations can do. They can help you, which is the primary aspect of a tenant association, help you fight your battles as a group. Fight the landlord's attempt to get the building vacated. Prove that your apartment is rent regulated. That allows you and affords you certain rights that unregulated apartments don't have. File HP actions as a group, for example, for harassment or for repairs, and get an order to repair. Seek an appointment of a 7A administrator to run the building if there are serious, dangerous conditions in the building and they're not being addressed by the current landlord. Make repairs in common areas of the building and deduct the cost of the repairs from your rent. Obtain repairs from the Housing Preservation and Development Emergency Repair Program. Work together on DHCR complaints for the whole building. Pursue informational advocacy, including lawyer letters for each other as tenants, and investigate purchasing the building as a group. There have been some tenant organizations that decided to do this for their tenants. And if we can go to the last slide, please. So that's about it for my slides. These are some of the copies of our tenants' rights facts. And if you could leave your email in the chat box, we can have that sent to you. Both our frequently asked questions regarding eviction during the pandemic time and other things that we can have in terms of tenants' rights. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Let me stop the share. There you go. Thank you very much, Michelle. That's good information. So that's the end of our workshop. I did leave some time for anyone to ask any questions. Again, if you do want to get in contact with us, you can leave your email, contact information in the chat. And if not, you can start asking any questions now. You can unmute yourself if you would like to speak, and we'll try to answer the questions the best we can.
I got a quick question for Michelle and Kaylee, and that is in terms of Corp A's role. I know that Corp A represents tenant groups in Housing Forward. The question is, what sort of general sorts of requirements, guidelines you have for making a determination to represent a tenant association, whether it's formal or informal?
Well, Kaylee can assist me in this answer, but usually we have an intake process for the tenant association. And through the intake process, we do an evaluation on your case, and a group of our supervisors will determine if we're able and eligible to represent you.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of that. So yes, it's really anyone is eligible. We definitely try to help whomever comes to us in regards to tenant associations and just outside of that as well. So yeah.
Anyone is eligible regardless of what the issues, the concerns might be. It's no limitation.
Yeah. Well, we are a nonprofit organization, so we do have a cap in terms of the people that we can serve. The point is to serve the underserved, right? So we do have an income limitation for tenants, specifically when in terms of their income, right?
Right.
We want to make sure to provide our services to those that are most in need, and we do try to do that as much as possible. So our intake process allows us to do that.
Yes, and also to what you said, Renee, about kind of any issue, a lot of the issues that we see, at least in our tenant associations, were issues that Juan and Michelle raised earlier: rats in the apartments, rent overcharges, what else? Non-renewal of rent, or, one tenant didn't get a lease renewal. They go around asking their other neighbors, no one's gotten a lease renewal. That's also something that we can help the tenant association with. Other things, one of our attorneys is working on a case where packages keep getting stolen from their building. So he's assisting the tenants with that. But like other things, like if there's multiple tenants in a building who the landlord's trying to evict and it seems like there's no reason, like Michelle and Juan brought up earlier, it could be like discriminatory. So those are just some examples that we help for TAs.
Great, thanks. So it just occurred to me as you were listing the different types of cases that we've actually been in touch with a building, not recently, just a few months ago, that reported super of a building, this rent stabilized building on Elton Street, where the super has been organizing like parties on weekends into the wee hours of the morning, and essentially, just disrupting the peace and quiet of the building to whatever degree that might be. I don't know how quiet it is when there's no partying going on. But I've been thinking that the owners, even though they've received complaints from tenants about these activities, the owners have essentially done nothing about it. And we've been thinking maybe the owners are trying to, some people are talking about moving, right? So owners may be trying to destabilize the building in a way where people will move out and they can get new folks, charge higher rents and so on and so forth, because they have not really, as far as we know, the owners has not tried to, discipline or reprimand or, as far as we know, put any pressure on the super to cease and desist with these, Saturday and Friday weekend parties in the basement, sometimes in the basement during the pandemic, when it was more intense, there was actually having these events in the lobby of the building as well. It was pretty serious, but as I mentioned, I don't know if that's something that Corpay might be interested in taking on.
In taking a look in.
Say again.
In taking a look at it, yes. We do nuisance cases. We do take on nuisance HP cases for tenants. And in terms of the tenant organization, if there is a tenant association and they want to contact us, or any tenant want to contact us, please feel free. They'll go through the intake process.
Right.
And from there on, we can continue to discuss representation.
And I'll put the email address in the chat.
Say again.
I'll put our general email address in the chat.
Oh,
I believe it's info@bka.org for people to email us with any questions. Currently, we are closed for call-ins at this time, but myself and our program director do try to email everyone that comes to us with some advice at least. And the advice isn't coming from me, it's coming from an attorney, and I'm just like sending it off.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions before we end? And if not, thank you all for joining the call. I do appreciate all the input that you guys have given, questions, everything. Please stay looking forward for any new workshops we'll be having in the future. Brooklyn Corporation A will definitely reach out to you guys as well to get whatever help we can get from you as well. But that'll be it. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope everyone enjoys a good night. Yeah, keep fighting. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.